But thank you for that. So yes, I am indeed Shel Banks. I am an IBCLC. I think it's one of the qualifications is that you actually can say that acronym. Otherwise, you're not allowed to be one. So I'm here today to talk about having effective antenatal infant feeding conversations. It's so tricky. You might be really well versed in what you should be saying to people, but actually it's very difficult to have those conversations with families. So that's what we're going to unpick a little bit today. Bit about me, as you say, I'm a lactation consultant. I do have a private practice, but it's so small as to be unnoticeable. Haven't actually had any private clients this month at all. I am a baby friendly lead in a hospital, and I work across neonatal and health visiting as well. And I've been working on baby friendly since 2007, so I'm fairly well versed in what's required there. And as you say, I'm a clinical director for Anya. I'm also a mother of 4. I've been pregnant many more times than 4, but I've had those discussions with infant feeding people, or actually just midwives at normal standard midwives in my antenatal care. I've breastfed my own kids, and it's why I became a breastfeeding peer supporter in 2002. And as you say, I've served on some nice guidelines, because when I know stuff and I can see stuff isn't quite right, I'm the sort of person who likes to stick my beak in and get involved and to put my 2 penneth in. So hopefully I did okay with those. As you say, I've also got a book out about formula feeding, which I thought it was really important to do. Took me a very long time to write it, to get it just right. And I've also started my PhD, which is also in infant feeding related. It's about unsettled babies, and I'm sure I'll be sharing that all over my socials. Feel free to follow me wherever you find me. So I thought I'd start with what even are effective antenatal infant feeding conversations. What aren't they? They're not, oh my goodness, breast is best, because that's not going to work. If you're talking to somebody who agrees with you with that sentiment, they're just going to agree with you. If you're talking to somebody who has never considered infant feeding or how they might feed their baby, and let's be honest, we know that most people who you talk to in their first pregnancy are thinking, oh my goodness, this thing is getting bigger all the time, and it's going to have to come out. And I've seen stuff, and I've watched, Call the Midwife or One Born Every Minute, or any number of dramatizations in which there's screaming and agony and blood and terror, and all they're thinking is 10 centimeters is like, and so feeding is not the number one thing. They are thinking, how's this thing going to get out? Is the baby okay? And also, how are we going to actually deliver a baby? It's only the first maybe couple of days, and perhaps buying things for the baby, that most people have considered. Certainly, most people, when they're having a baby, we don't know what we're doing. I was 30. I thought I knew what it was going to be like. I hadn't got a clue. I remember being driven away from the hospital, chit-chatting away, and the baby in the back made a noise, and we looked at each other and said, oh my goodness, do you think they realize we haven't got a clue what we're doing? And they've let us go home with this baby. And we were proper grown-ups, mortgages and businesses, and in our 30s and 40s at that time. So there's a lot of stuff that they need to have communicated to them. And the midwife who sees them during that antenatal time, or the health visitor, or whoever else from the team, or if they're lucky enough to attend an infant feeding class, there are so many messages. There's lots of pregnancy health messages, lots of prevention messages, lots of safety messages. And then there's all the stuff that we sort of feel is kind of bolted on at the end, the relationship building and the infant feeding stuff, the stuff about prevention and safety and stuff, kind of, these things about whether breastfeeding is a good idea, or whether they've only ever thought about formula feeding. They need to have enough information to make informed choices. And they need to have enough information about feeding. And, you know, we always can start with caring for and bonding, because that's an easier conversation to have. But I've never, ever met anyone who's had enough information antenatally, just from having their normal routine care, to make decisions themselves, good informed decisions about infant feeding. It's very difficult to prepare people adequately. What we can do is get them to actually be making informed choices about everything. And that encourages them to go off and look for information themselves, and to look for how they might build one and what they need to know themselves. So there's this, which the lovely Amy Brown, I emailed her and said, or messaged her and said, what do I need to say then? And she said, yeah, you need to look at this. So this is, what do women really want? Lessons for breastfeeding promotion and education. So I picked this out, which was key themes included a move away from the perception that breastfeeding is best rather than normal. I love to reframe it and think about our biological norm, and any deviation from the biological norm coming with consequences. And I often talk about, so as to not make that judgmental when we're talking about breastfeeding or not, I often say, you know, having your ears pierced is a deviation from the biological norm. Personally, I love a dangly earring. I like the feeling. I think it makes my face look pretty, goes with my glasses, you know. I like an earring, but every one of us knows someone who's had an earring pulled out, or it's gone gammy or something. Every deviation from the biological norm comes with consequences. Driving in the car, you can't have a car accident if you aren't in a car. So every deviation from the biological norm comes with consequences. Antibiotics are a deviation from the biological norm. But if I've got sepsis, please give me all of the antibiotics, because I don't want to die of sepsis. So they come with consequences, but sometimes the consequences are beneficial. So talking about biological norms, talking about things other than the health benefits, because the health benefits only fit if that family is susceptible to or worried about the health benefit that we're banging on about. And actually, as it says, a message that every feed rather than just 6 months exclusive. People have got in their mind, actually lots of people have got in their mind, that just the first feed is enough. I think Amy's hit it on the head here when she says targeting everybody. It's a wider society problem. So what I'm saying is, I get that this is hard. Right? There are some issues. What makes the conversation effective or ineffective? They need to trust the person they're having this conversation with. There's no point in you saying, hello, I've never met you before, but I've got to give you a lecture about infant feeding now, because I've got a list to tick off and I need to tell you about benefits, and dram that home and make sure that you've understood all of the messages I need to tell you. You know, we know that pregnant and newly delivered parents are right-brained focused. They're not left-brained, logical, sequential like us. They're a bit more fluffy, and they need things to be presented in a way where it slots onto information they've already got, builds on existing knowledge, and is really light on any new information. So you've got these opportunities across many different antenatal appointments, and to share that load between everybody who's seeing this mother, and to drip feed information at different points. So that's what I'm gonna bang on about. It's important because there is a wealth of evidence that breastfeeding is a massive public health imperative. As it says, if a new vaccine was available that could prevent 1 million or more child deaths a year, and it was cheap, safe, administered orally, and required no cold chain, it would become an immediate public health imperative. And, you know, that's 1994. Why did we not already sit up and take notice in 1994? It's such a slow burn. And I know you've already talked about the Lancet, I'm sure briefly, when we had the new Learnset report out last month, but I'm going to touch on it again today. So we had originally this 2016 report, the Lancet breastfeeding series, and it had huge amounts of up-to-date, robust, evidence-based, really research, data-focused looks at breastfed babies having fewer infections and, protection against overweight and so on and so on, really in depth. And I spoke to one of the authors at a conference, and he was super enthusiastic about it. And obviously there's a lot of work had gone into it. And it was about 2 years after it had happened. And he said, what I can't understand is we've published this, and yet it doesn't seem to have changed anything. Like, he thought, well, if we build it, if we tell everybody this news, the problem must be that people don't understand that breastfeeding is a good idea. And of course, that's not the problem at all, because people do understand. These are some of the images that came out in 2016, big, bold messages. As another one here, could save more than 820,000 lives a year. I think in the UK this was dismissed a little bit because it's kind of, those are developing world babies. Those are babies who haven't got access to clean water. Well, that's not quite what the evidence said, but obviously we have much better mortality rates here, and so it's not as big a threat to most babies. However, we've got big health inequities in this country, big, meaning the difference between a baby who is born in one postcode and another baby born in another postcode, based on things like family income and ethnicity and the age of the parents and the mental health of the parents and the physical health of the parents and what access there are to services. And we talk about this postcode lottery, but there is nothing more crucial than those formative days, weeks, months of an infant's life, because that's lifelong stuff being laid down. And the impact of health inequities on our babies can't be underestimated. And we know that, I just pulled something from the Marmot Review here. And again, it's 13 years since this was published, but the data stands. Babies who aren't breastfed are at increased risks of diarrhea and vomiting, ear and respiratory infections, cognitive delay, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. And then mothers are least likely to breastfeed if they are poor, if they are in the lower 2 socioeconomic centiles, 20% less likely than the most affluent mothers. And if they're under 20, they are 1/3 less likely than mothers over the age of 34. So we have all this information, and it's been out for years, and we broadcast it and we share it. And, most trusts are now doing baby friendly. Most universities are now doing baby friendly. Most of us know this information, have been given this information, but it's still really difficult to get these messages across. So why is it so difficult? It's difficult because these are the images, lovely little mobile for a baby with a bottle on it, the baby doll that the little girl's got. From the moment we're tiny kids, breasts are used for selling things and babies are fed with bottles. And that's really hard to get past, because that's our culture. And so our culture experiences have led to actually us having pretty much the lowest breastfeeding rates in the world. And then if you add in the idea that a midwife or a health visitor or some other health professional might be the one saying, well, you should be losing weight, eating properly, getting plenty of exercise, cutting, stopping smoking, getting away from that difficult relationship that you're in, buying the right things for your baby, and you should be breastfeeding, and. Most of us have a bit of a mistrust of authority figures, purely because we went to school, we've been in the world, and we start to kind of go, yeah, but I can make my own choices, I know better. So we can only counter these things where authority figures tend to undermine themselves with these techniques like motivational interviewing. There is, I haven't for some reason put the link at the bottom of this one, but anyway, the link is in my references. And so that is more about, rather than telling them things, you follow what they say, you direct the conversation and you guide them into reaching a conclusion that is a better decision for them, a more informed choice. So it's asking them questions and listening to what they've said before informing them. There is no point in just going in with information, because I don't listen either sometimes. So why would we, when we're being bombarded with advice and recommendations? Then we have the Lancet 2023, and again, they're very excited about it. It's going to change the world. They've gone a completely different way this time. They're not talking about the benefits of breastfeeding. They're kind of gone, we've done that. Actually, this is about the exploitation of the commercial milk formula industry of our vulnerable families. And we should all be quite angry about that, actually, because we're spending loads of time and energy trying to get messages across to people. I'm furious, hence the book. I want families to have good information about formula, and that should not come from the people who are selling the formula. That needs to come from independent and trustworthy sources. So advertising, marketing, all of the little ripples in a pond that are done by these companies, we have a collective responsibility. So I'm just going to, give you some examples of how shocking it is. First of all, it's almost always beautiful looking white families. So maybe that doesn't fit everybody's need for their imagery. They almost always have beautiful soft focus and all beautifully written, and make wild claims about things. And then even more shocking is the stuff on the right hand side, because the stuff aimed at health professionals, which if you ever subscribe to any journals, or you're doing any CPD, which is not as good as this stuff here for Matflix, but you're doing stuff which has been paid for by industry, you will find you're just being advertised to every third page, and it's nice and glossy. And I saw a beautiful piece of CPD the other day, and I scroll to the bottom and you get that, how you can support mums to breastfeed, and it's an advert for a company that makes nipple shields and creams and breast pumps and all sorts of things. And it's not about helping to breastfeed at all. In fact, it's about why we might need their products, and we don't need their products. So what we need is really good support. And as an IBCLC, always find somebody who knows what they're talking about. That's the clue. So what they're saying is, and I'll just put these slides up very briefly. I encourage you, it's only 3 articles. I encourage you to go and read them yourself. It's not as big as the 2016, which was huge and amassed a load of really good evidence base. It's just 3 pieces this time, and they're all in the references about the way that marketing is working. So there's done some beautiful infographics here as well. You can have the slides from us, so you'll be able to come back and have a look at these at your leisure as well. But, only 1 in 2 newborns are put to the breast in the first hour of life. That's so sad. So sad. It's calling on the society's collective responsibility to protect, promote and support breastfeeding, not just for breastfeeding mothers, not just for breastfeeding babies, but for all babies, because formula advertising does not serve families and babies. It serves the company. It is about making money. And that's not what we should be dealing with. So we've got some issues. Now, what do we do? So the promised 5 easy wins are coming up. And they're not actually specific pieces of information, because I could have done a presentation about what you need to tell people antenatally. But if you're at uni or you're in post and you're going to infant feeding training in your trust, you will already be receiving this, and you can find this information very easily. I think it's actually more important that we look at how it's delivered. So that's what we're going to look at. And this is my one and only slide that contains a shameless plug for the app, but it demonstrates really nicely some counselling skills being done by the AI. So C is for counselling skills. We are going to care. C is for counselling skills. We need to listen to them before we try to inform them. We need to accept their feelings. There's no point if the mother is feeling like she's failing before she started. If you respond by saying, no, that's not true, what you've done is tell her you don't believe what she says. So we always say, oh, poor you, or yes, lots of people say they feel like that. Accept it first, because that's your springboard. And language is such a tricky thing. And we say things, I'm talking live to all of you now. The words are just tumbling out of my mouth. At any moment, I might say something that's twisted a little bit in the way it's come from my brain to out into the world. And we need to be really careful with our language. But we're not robots. We're all humans. So practicing your positive, non-judgmental language and all of your soft skills, and practicing using appropriate and personalized language is good. But I would say, if you hear something tumble out of your mouth that you think, ooh, that wasn't the right way of phrasing it, you just say, what I mean is, and you retreat, you reframe, and you represent it, and maybe say it twice, maybe repeat it later in the good way of saying it, so that you can just, help them to hear it in a better way than you maybe said it the first time. Also really key, checking understanding. That is not to say that you say, do you understand what I mean? Because almost everyone will say, yeah. You actually need to ask them what they've heard from you. Is that making sense for you? Is there anything that you'd like to share back with me? What have you got from that? How has that changed what you're thinking about? Did that add to what you're thinking about? In what way? And so you can move the learning on from there. And if they've slightly misunderstood something, that's the time that you pick it up. The second C is for collaboration with colleagues. So I've put up, that's just a pretty picture from the digital maternity program, all about how we talk to each other. And I've also put up the Badger and You're a King logos. I'm sure other people exist as well, but it's an opportunity to communicate with our colleagues. So yes, we discuss at every opportunity with the expectant parent as an individual, but there's more than just you speaking to this parent. So make sure they've got the same messages coming from lots of different places, and maybe say, oh, so you had, your scan appointment. Did anybody talk to you about infant feeding? Or, oh, you've seen the consultant. Did they speak to you about infant feeding? Or, I wasn't here last time. I see you saw Sally. Did she mention anything about infant feeding? What did you cover? Let's move on from that. And you can record that in your notes. Make sure that the colleagues can see what's been discussed, not just a box that ticks. If you can, actually write something. And if the mother has decided she wants to breastfeed, one key thing that staff members have said to me is, wouldn't it be nice to actually have it written in the notes and in the birth plan that this mother intends to breastfeed, so that when that baby is born, if there's any obstacles, any bumps in the road, the staff involved know this mother intends to breastfeed. We better make sure we facilitate that. That's something we need to keep in mind, because it isn't the thing you're thinking about when you're delivering a baby. Mostly you're thinking about the safety and the mother and the baby. I get that. I have, the luxury of not being a midwife. I think you're all amazing, potentially slightly unhinged. However, it's because you're doing such a hard job, such a responsible job, and absolutely, as Sue said, not enough of you, and very, very stressed. But we can support the parent at every stage of contact if we all work together on it. And further than that, it's not just individual members of staff. It's about our educational strategies. It's about changes in policy and practice. And it's about the whole of the healthcare system, not just one midwife, one clinic, one infant feeding lead trying to do everything. It needs to be completely systemic. It needs to be from your director or your head of midwifery, from the board level of the trust down. It needs to be filtered through everything. It needs to be the whole LMNS, the local maternity and neonatal system. Everybody all saying the same things and getting the right education, the policies and procedures in. So A is for assume everyone will surprise you. because it's easier, we tend to pigeonhole people and we make assumptions. And there's that saying, isn't there? Assume makes an ass out of you and me. Assume at your peril. People will surprise you. You might meet, and I spoke to a family nurse practitioner this week, and they work with the teenage cohort. Historically, it's changing slightly now. And she was saying that actually she's seeing the breastfeeding rates amongst the young mothers actually going up. And she's found it surprising that she didn't even really know very much about breastfeeding to tell them necessarily. And it hadn't been part of her kind of regular patter because it wasn't taken well. But now more of them are breastfeeding. So that's lovely. Don't know if that's necessarily happening in the over 30s as well. But anyway, but they might not know what you expect to know. Again, we need to ask, and we need to listen. They might know absolutely loads and already have read 17 books and gone on a course and have 3 friends who have come round and given them loads of information. They might have really fixed intentions. I am definitely going to breastfeed, or I am definitely not going to breastfeed, but they equally might never have thought about it ever. And they may not have the plans that you would plan for them, but they are their plans. And what we need to do is make sure that these are informed choices they are making. There's nothing more traumatic and grief striking than finding out later that you made decisions based on something that wasn't true, or you didn't have all the information. So people get angry later and defensive and grief stricken later. R is for referring on to others. This is not all on you. Frontline member of staff takes on a huge responsibility, but actually, if there are reputable and reliable sources for you to signpost to, if there is a peer support group, if there is an infant feeding team, if there are antenatal courses, I'm going to say, if you're using Anya in your local area, signpost to the app, get them in when they're pregnant, get them to the breastfeeding groups when they're pregnant, get them going to these antenatal classes, signpost them to good websites and good Facebook groups locally. It might be that there's a brilliant local Facebook group. If you don't know the answer, it is always better to say, that's a really good question. I don't know. I'm going to ask so-and-so and I'll come back to you. Or I'm going to get so-and-so to get in touch. And that's how it works in my trust. We don't have a specialist infant feeding team with an email and a clinic and all of that. Our setup is really ad hoc. Literally today, I've spoken to 2 health visitors, a midwife and somebody from the paediatric ward who just got in touch and just wanted to ask a question about something, or they put somebody in touch with me to contact. And that's how it works. It's all very, they know that when they don't know, it's better to pass it on. And it shares the burden, and it's not you then having to hold all the essential information. You're signposting them to reliable sources. And that doesn't mean giving them a discharge email from the hospital that's got 75 different links to click to open things, because they're not going to open them. Even in the days when we used to have leaflets and bits of photocopied stuff, I might have flicked through it. But if it's a photocopy of a photocopy and it looks like you're not very valuable, you feel not very valuable. It feels not important. We loved, didn't we? Have I got one on my desk? We loved have the old off to the best start leaflet, and it's it's got pages and pages and it's shiny. That was great, but we don't have that anymore. So we have to find electronic things to give them that actually will make them feel good. And that's because they need to feel empowered. E is for empowered. They need to believe it's realistic. They need self-efficacy. They need to feel like this is something they can do. And they need a connection to the appropriate support so that they can facilitate those wishes. So I'm not going to read all of this out. I do invite you to go and have a look. This is from, actually, these are my PhD supervisors, and I know their work really well, Jill Thompson and Nicola Crossland. But this is about them evaluating a peer support scheme local to me. But they looked at the empowerment, the way that they felt empowered. So, it positively influenced their beliefs toward breastfeeding. I learned so much about it. And prior to this, I was unconvinced whether I would bottle or breastfeed, but I had no doubt after that support. So that's what you need. Somebody who's going to make you feel like it's within your grasp. I've stuffed this in at the end because it exists and we should be using it. So the Good Practice Guide for Midwives, this is all the information that needs to be dealt with in pregnancy. But look at how it suggests you do it. What I'm saying is not new. This is from 2012. Find out how parents imagine the baby. Take time to listen. Ask the partner to sing to the baby, point out that the ultrasound shows the baby actually reacting and so on. This is how we build relationship with the baby so that they are going to make better informed choices because it's a real person. So, brief recap. Number one, this is a public health imperative. We absolutely need to be doing it. I don't take away from the fact that it is difficult because we've got marketing influences, we've got cultural influences, but our socioeconomic factors of some of our families that we work with make it even more important for them. And with the cost of formula being what it is and the cost of electric being what it is and everything else going through the roof, it's even more important. And it doesn't just come down to you, it is everyone's responsibility. So then our recap of our care is, I've put these in the wrong order just to confuse everybody. Counselling is essential. Collaborate with your colleagues. Assume everyone's going to surprise you. Refer on and be honest. And empower those expectant parents so that they've got the information they need to make the good informed choices. So I'm here on behalf of Anya. Anya does have a 1,000 days scope from conception to the child's second birthday. And the intent is that the parents could then have evidence-based information. And this helps staff who are frontline with those families to collaborate with it and get those public health messages across from all directions and in a way that feels non-judgmental and safe and so on. You can contact us. You can email hello@Lancet. You can look on our website, which is Anya Health, and you can find us on the socials on Anya Lancet. And here are my references, which I know you've provided separately. And that's me done.